Having blind faith in a coach or a specific player can sometimes get you in trouble, but a recent Saturday Down South article discussing blind faith in Josh Heupel's offense, it makes a whole lot of sense. I want to react to that article and a whole lot more, talking blind faith, Josh Heupel, and his offensive numbers here on a Thursday, Locked On Vols.
You are Locked On Vols, your daily podcast on the Tennessee Volunteers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, everybody? Welcome into it. This is your Thursday edition of the week, Locked On Vols, your team every single day. We're a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks so much for making Locked On Vols your first listen each and every day, wherever you get your podcasts. We're on YouTube. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the Locked On Vols YouTube channel and Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Odyssey, wherever you get your podcasts. Would greatly appreciate a follow and a subscription there as well. Completely free every single weekday, 30 minutes, maybe 33 minutes or less, talking Tennessee Volunteers. Couldn't do it without you everydayers. Welcome back to the show. Today's show, going to have a whole lot of fun. I mentioned the cold open, blind faith in Josh Heupel's offense and why you should buy into that. I think it makes a whole lot of sense. I want to react to some of those points that Saturday Down South was making. Josh Ward, it's Thursday, but we'll have a little Ward Wednesday here today. That's in segment 2. And then Phil Steele actually joined Josh's radio show earlier this week on 99.1 The Sports Animal. Had a lot of great things to say. We're going to hear what he had to say about Tennessee heading into the new season. All that and more right here on Locked On Vols. So, when you go to Saturday Down South, I encourage you to go and read this article. It's from Connor O'Gara. And it pretty much says, blind faith in Josh Heupel's offense. He's kind of earned that for fans and for media alike. Just to kind of expect, knowing what to expect with the Josh Heupel run offense. And the big question this year is Joe Milton. It's replacing Hendon Hooker. And that's a fair question. And if you're kind of hesitant to think Tennessee's going to get back to where it was last year, I think that's completely fair because Hendon Hooker was great. Hendon Hooker was one of the best quarterbacks Tennessee's ever had, probably the best quarterback, since Peyton Manning, and comparable to Josh Dobbs. I mean, there's not been a lot of great quarterback play since Peyton. There's been some good ones, don't get me wrong, but Hendon Hooker kind of stands out amongst the pack, and you're having to replace that. And you're doing it with Joe Milton, who has all the intangibles in the world, but has failed as a starting quarterback at Michigan. Got hurt shortly in his starting quarterback tenure, as Josh will mention here in a moment, in 2021. Now it's kind of round 3. And so if you have questions, and I have questions, I mean, that's completely fair game. But what this article at Saturday Down South is kind of preaching and kind of saying is, hey, you look at the stats with Josh Heupel being a head coach, you look at the stats with Josh Heupel being a coordinator, an offensive coordinator, it's safe to assume that offense is going to be okay. It's kind of having blind faith, and I think that it makes a whole lot of sense. So you look at the last 5 years. Here's a list of head coaches who have had top 10 scoring offenses every year. Last 5 years, top 10 scoring offenses every single year. Josh Heupel's on that list. Lincoln Riley is on that list. And Nick Saban is on that list. And then that list is done. I mean, that's it. Of course, Nick Saban, he's a defensive coach, but he, gets the biggest toys and the best toys and, some good coaches to play around in there. Lincoln Riley is a quarterback whisperer, of course, and Josh Heupel is a quarterback whisperer, of course. For a little perspective, Saturday Down South says that ties the longest such streak since Steve Spurrier did it at Florida back from 1993 to 1997. It pretty much means that it doesn't matter who your quarterback is, Josh Heupel can work with anybody. And that's something I remember. It was actually Joey Halsley, back when he was just the quarterback's coach in his first press conference setting, back when they were introducing the entire new staff in 2021 and around, I guess, was spring practice that 2021. And he said, hey, we don't have a prototypical quarterback that fits our offense. We like guys who can move. We like guys who have strong arms. We like guys, most importantly, that can process information at a fast clip, make decisions, and move the offense and work the tempo. And that's kind of the only caveat that they have in terms of, quarterbacks that they look for. But, I mean, you look at who Josh Heupel has worked with, as a quarterback of his offense. You had very successful seasons with Drew Locke, who went on to be a big-time NFL draft pick. McKenzie Milton, who was one of college football's best quarterbacks when he was healthy. Dylan Gabriel, who took over for Mackenzie Milton during the injury at UCF and turned out to be one of the best quarterbacks in college at that time. And of course, he moved on, finished elsewhere. Then you have Hendon Hooker, and we know about Hendon Hooker here at Tennessee. All those quarterbacks are not necessarily the same guy. They bring different intangibles to the table. They do things better than some of the others in that regard, but they're all really, really good. It's pretty solid when you look at it. If you look at Josh Heupel's offenses the last couple of years, last 6 seasons, these were the worst marks that his group finished with. This is the worst, and point being, it's still pretty good, right? Points per game, the lowest point per game total Josh Heupel's offenses in the last 6 years produced, 37.5. That was 14th in the country, 2017 at Missouri. That's not bad, right? Yards per play, 6.47. That was number 17 in the country. That was 2021 Tennessee. Yards per pass, 8.5. That was number 14 in all of college football. That was 2018 at UCF. Passing yards per game was 2021 Tennessee, and that was 257.1, which is not bad. And then yards per game, 474.4 yards per game. That was 9th in the country, and that was in 2021. Again, these marks are not bad at all, but these are the worst marks under Josh Heupel in the last 6 seasons. Pretty impressive. But also, it's the run game as well. I've talked about it plenty of times on VolQuest and right here on this podcast and doing interviews out of market. The fact that people think this is just an air raid, and the fact that people think that all you do is throw it around. You're going to throw it around. You're going to let it rip, as Joey Halsley will say. But you're also going to run the football. Running the football is what sets up everything in this offense, and a lot of offenses, but also this offense in particular. These are the worst rushing marks of a Josh Heupel-led team the last 6 seasons. The worst. Rushing yards per game, 193.5. That's almost 200 yards per game. That's not bad at all. That was back in 2017 at Missouri. That was number 36 in the country. Rushing yards per carry, 4.75, was 41st in the country. That was 2020 UCF. And 20-yard runs, 20 of those at Missouri in 2017. That was number 52 in the country. Again, all those are not bad whatsoever. Josh Heupel has averaged 200 yards rushing per game in his 2 seasons here at Tennessee. And as we talked about on, I guess it was it Tuesday's show? Was it Wednesday's show? I can't remember. Explosive plays. There's been plenty of explosive plays of 40-plus yards, of 50-plus yards, of 60-plus yards. There's even been one of 90-plus yards. The one that comes to mind, a 92-yard run against Missouri, Tyon Evans back in 2021. So it's been pretty remarkable when you think about that 6-year stretch when he was the offensive coordinator at Missouri, going over being a head coach at UCF, and then, of course, the last 2 seasons at Tennessee. It's been pretty remarkable. 2017 at Missouri, 2018, 19, and 20 at UCF, and then 21 and 22 here at the University of Tennessee. That's been pretty good. And also, it's not been with a pipeline of NFL caliber quarterbacks. You think of what Lincoln Riley's had to work with, okay? Baker Mayfield, Kyler Murray, Jalen Hurts worked with Lincoln Riley. It's been pretty remarkable seeing that it's been with Mackenzie Milton, Dylan Gabriel, Hendon Hooker. Again, all good players. Drew Locke, of course, is in that conversation, but all good players. But we're not talking about number 1 overall in the NFL draft type players. So, again, there's questions surrounding Tennessee's offense. There's questions surrounding, will Tennessee regress? And again, in my opinion, you had a 10-win regular season. You're losing a top 10 offensive tackle in Darnell Wright. You're losing 2 day 2 receivers and a Biletnikoff Award winner in Jalen Hyatt and Cedric Tillman. You're losing your quarterback, who, in my opinion, should have been a Heisman finalist, okay? You're losing some talented players, but you're also returning some. And you're returning a new quarterback. And mind you, a quarterback in Joe Milton, who was actually the starting quarterback in 2021. Sure, he had his struggles, and as much as we like to think of that was a disaster, and again, Josh will actually comment on this in a moment, it was such a short sample size that I don't think it's really fair. It was like 5.5 quarters, okay? And he went through his struggles, sure, but he got injured. Hendon Hooker came in, and that's all she wrote. And in Joe Milton's mind, he never lost the starting quarterback job, but obviously when Hendon Hooker comes in and plays the way he is, you're not going to make a change. So this is going to be round 3 for Joe Milton. Experience. Got the best arm in the country. Okay, he's big, he's quick, he's smart. He has a better understanding now of the Josh Heupel offense entering year 3 than he ever has. And you couple that with this blind faith idea that the Josh Heupel coach offense is going to be okay. I think there's reason to believe Tennessee, the expectation should be double-digit wins. It should be 10 wins, but a reminder, in my opinion, if you finish 9-3, it's not the end of the world. It might be, quote-unquote, a regression, but that's not falling off. That does not mean that 2022 was a one-off type season. That does not mean that 2023 is a failure. It's just college football. So it's very alarming sometimes when fans have this blind faith in coaches. You see it all the time. Just here in particular, we'll use Tennessee as an example. Butch Jones, he can do no wrong, right? He's the head coach. Jeremy Pruitt, he can do no wrong. He's the head coach. Derek Dooley, he can do no wrong. He's the head coach until they do, right? And, unless you're Nick Saban, unless you're some of these, coaches that are good year in and year out, the majority of head coaching stints end in divorce. It ends in being fired. And I'm not saying that I believe Josh Heupel's going to be like that or whatever. I'm just saying it's never smart to blindly trust a head coach and just think that, quote unquote, they're the savior. And I'm not saying to do this with Josh Heupel, but I agree with a lot of what this Saturday Down South article says. When it comes to his offense, when it comes to being a Power 5 offensive coordinator at Missouri dating back to 2017, being a head coach at UCF, and being the head coach at University of Tennessee, when you look at those offenses and look at the different personnel that ran them, the different styles of quarterbacks, there's no reason to think Tennessee's offense is going to just all of a sudden fall back because you lost Hendon Hooker. So I agree with a lot of this stuff. I think this is a pretty good article, and I encourage you to go read the whole thing over at Saturday Down South, and we'll have to see exactly what this offense looks like. SEC Media Days is coming up, then fall camp, and then, hey, Virginia will be here before you know it. All right, we'll get a little Josh Ward action here on a Thursday. That's coming up in segment number 2. And then in segment 3, Phil Steele actually joined him and Jason Swain on their radio show. What is he having to say about Tennessee? Some good stuff that's coming up here in just one moment. But hey, take your first swing at betting Major League Baseball over at FanDuel Sportsbook. There, you can get 10 times your first bet amount in bonus bets. That's up to $200. That's right, just bet $20 and you'll land $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. Not bad, right? That's $200 you can spend on betting anything from the run line, anything from the total, the over, the under, or who you think might have the first hit of the ball game, the first strikeout of the ball game, the first home run, or the first double of the ball game. Prop bets are endless over at FanDuel Sportsbook. It's all on an app that is safe and secure and super easy to use, where you're going to get paid out instantly. You win a bet, you get your money right then and there. No more waiting around till the end of the week, twice a month, whatever that case may be. You get paid instantly. There's no better place to bet on Major League Baseball than over at FanDuel. It's America's #1 sports book. Sign up today. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get up to $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball. All right, guys, segment number 2 of your Thursday edition of Locked On Vols. It's not Wednesday, but the holiday kind of throws a wrench into that. But we got Josh Ward on for his weekly appearance. Josh, what's going on, man? Did you have a good 4th?
Great 4th. Celebrated Independence Day. Kids had a blast. Fireworks late at night. So, yeah, all good stuff. Hope everybody did.
Something I wrote about and we talked about on this podcast a little bit, firework moments for Tennessee athletics this last year. I mean, arguably it's been the best year in a couple of different decades for Tennessee athletics, top to bottom. But when you think of firework moments, what are the ones that jump out to you?
Well, I remember after the game, Jalen Hyatt being asked about a touchdown against Alabama, and he said, which one? Because he had 5. So that, and then the very end with the kick to win it, because the time is ticking away and you have the immediate rush. So the Alabama game is going to be high up there. Non-touchdown firework moments, the Ramel Keaton long catch in the first half against Florida down the right sideline was a huge play, which led to a touchdown and fireworks and a big score to go into the half. And then Tennessee was able to carry that momentum over to start the second half against Florida. That would stand out to me on the football field. And then a Ramel Keaton touchdown against Clemson. So if we go back to that game, that, and then the scene of the Kentucky game, Tennessee blows them out. Defense is making plays. Offense rolls up points. They had a lot of explosive plays offensively and as a program this past year.
Yeah, and you think about football, there was a couple of those firework moments in basketball and baseball as well. It was a really, really good year, and a nice little thing to discuss on the 4th of July holiday in and
Yeah,
around
I
it.
stuck to football, but Zane Denton's home run against Clemson would be
Mhm.
an obvious one, 3-run shot. So a big home run at a moment they had to have something. They didn't necessarily have to have a home run there, but it certainly worked. So that would stand out on the baseball field. And then the 9th inning home run against Vanderbilt to tie, and then forced extra innings where they won. Who knows where the season goes without that earlier in SEC play.
When you look at the Tennessee football team, fall camp's going to start in less than a month. Now we're just chipping away at the days. Look at this freshman class. Who was the most important freshman for Tennessee, in your opinion, heading into the season?
The most important freshman this season, I'd like to know which defensive back to choose. That's where I begin the conversation, just because they have to be better in the defensive backfield. I also don't know that a freshman's playing a huge role, a starting role right away, because we have these veterans coming back that are a huge part of the conversation. But Matthews or Ricky Gibson, those are guys that they walk onto the practice field and like, okay, let's see what that guy can do and the way that they can move. So that's where I'd probably start the conversation. Arion Carter is a guy that I have a lot of intrigue in. They have veterans, though, and Aaron Beasley and Keenan Peely as a transfer that started that conversation, and then Elijah Herring entering year 2. But defensive backfield, linebacker, and then I'm really intrigued by Cameron Seldon. Again, there's a ton of competition there at running back with Jalen Wright and Jabari Small, as much that they've played, and Dylan Sampson. So there's not one player that I would point to say, okay, that guy has to be a big-time player, but a position where they need help the most would be the defensive backfield. That's where I started there.
Do you think the defensive backfield has of course, is going to have the opportunity, because statistically it wasn't great last year. Do you think that'll be the most improved position for Tennessee this upcoming season?
Going through, maybe so. They definitely have the most room to improve, in my opinion.
Yeah.
From where they were a year ago. It's such an interesting position group because they have so much returning experience. They have guys all over the place at different position groups, safety, at nickel, at corner, that have just played a ton of snaps in the SEC. But I think fans want to replace all of them, but not all fans, but a lot of fans. And then you have this really talented freshman group come in, and they come in early in the spring semester, and they create excitement with what they're able to do. But it's just an obvious question. How much do coaches trust young players versus veterans that they've coached the last few years and believe they can get more out of? So most room for improvement. Man, I like how linebacker can be even better. I don't know if they have the most room to improve, but maybe from a consistency standpoint, and you have a veteran who's just an older guy that you can trust in Keenan Peely to go along with the young guys we talked about. So, yeah, I think so. Probably the secondary for most room for improvement, but the biggest question still going into.
Yeah, and I was also asked about a position group earlier on the Mailbag podcast this week, about a position group that could regress from where it was last year. And it's kind of hard to answer that. You're taking quarterback out of the equation because, that's its own monster. But when you look at this offensive line, I don't think this offensive line is going to be bad, but they've got to figure some things out. I mean, you're going to have a brand new starting left guard. You're trying to replace a tackle in Darnell Wright, who was a top 10 pick. So there's a whole lot of questions, and that group needs to play, a lot of snaps with each other, create some chemistry. I think that group can get a whole lot better as the season goes on, but I think that's one of the more intriguing position groups for Tennessee this year, no doubt.
Yeah, position group, I would say the offensive line. If you want to restrict that to the tackles, you could do that. But left guard is a question to me, with having to replace Jerome Carvin, who would be one of the more underappreciated players of the last couple of seasons for Tennessee football. As good as they were, especially at right tackle with Darnell Wright, and the jump that they had made from 2021 to 2022, it's one of my bigger questions, because you still have the unknown of competition there at guard. What if you do deal with injuries? They were healthy last year on the offensive line. Expecting that is not something you can typically do in the game of football. So really, you expect to deal with injuries at some point. If you deal with injury at center, then we have real concerns, I think, about what happens to that group. We know how important Cooper Mays is. So, the quarterback position is obvious because of what Hendon was, as much confidence as there is in Joe's development over the last couple of years. But if you take quarterback off the table, I would immediately jump to the offensive line. And at right tackle, especially, no knock on Mincy or Crawford or Dane Davis, but Darnell Wright was a top 10 pick in the NFL draft. That is a huge statement and a huge player to have to replace.
So over the offseason, by various different publications, you get a lot of these anonymous SEC coach quotes on other players around the league. One of those that kind of surfaced last week was, hey, Joe Milton's not the guy. Tennessee's in trouble with Joe Milton, essentially. Not sure if you saw that, but when you hear that from an anonymous SEC coach, kind of what do you think?
Well, I'm still curious. I'm confident that Joe Milton is better. I think the Clemson game showed some of the progression that he's made, that if you're in the middle of a game and everything's not going great, that he can limit mistakes. He can get you through. The running game is going to be important. Everybody recognizes that. And Joe is still going to make plays in this offense, and receivers are going to get open, which will help him be a better quarterback. As good as Hendon Hooker was last year, I don't have that expectation at all, and I don't think that's fair on the outside for Joe. He may have that, and that's great. He should have that confidence. But I think the floor for him is higher than a lot of people discuss. Like, I think at the start of 2021, the way that he was playing, sometimes the conversation is that he was an absolute disaster. He was not that. He was missing on some overthrows, which got talked about a lot. His decision-making had to be better, of course. Everybody recognizes that. But there were still some things they could do within the offense. But if they do have some offensive line concerns and they take a step back there, that could hurt him. And if he does turn the ball over, because last year in the time that we saw him, he took care of the football overall. I think that raises the floor for him. But I mean, if you're not questioning whether Joe is really going to be an all SEC level quarterback, if he can really keep Tennessee's offense close to the level where it was last year, then I don't think you're being fair in the conversation. It's still a question until he shows he can do it more consistently through more games, not just a Vanderbilt game where they were running literally all over the Commodores, and then a bowl game. But the early signs of what he did last year heading into being the full-time starter are positive. I don't think you can say anything otherwise.
All right, last thing, Josh, in less than 2 weeks, SEC Media Days are here. What do you think are going to be some of the firework conversations talked about? And who do you think, at least from Tennessee, is going to represent the Volunteers player-wise?
So I think topics will probably be a continuation of what we've discussed this offseason, we meaning just about everybody, NIL, transfer portal, tampering, scheduling in the future. They've tabled the conversation, so it'll come back up again. As much as Kirby Smart wants to say it's overrated, well, that's something that Greg Sankey and the presidents and everybody else in the SEC continue to talk about. So I'm sure we will. On the field, the return of Hugh Freeze, I think, is a pretty big topic because Auburn football matters so much, and he's proven that he can win. We know how he was doing it in some ways, but also rules have changed since he was last in the SEC. So I think that's a big deal. To me, a big topic is the quarterback position, not just Tennessee, but Georgia and Alabama with new quarterbacks, Florida replacing Anthony Richardson. Jaden Daniels comes back and gets a lot of hype, but quarterback is a real question, even with all the potential these different schools have. Players off the top of my head that will be there or should be there, I would say Joe Milton is obvious at quarterback. I would say Cooper Mays at center is a player that should be there. And then defense, first player that comes to mind is Aaron Beasley. I'm sorry, Amari Thomas. Amari Thomas would be my selection on the defensive side. So those would be my top three candidates. I'm sure I missed somebody else that would be a good representative right away. But your center, who is so important, your quarterback is obvious. And then Amari Thomas has been a leader in the athletic department through the Vol Leaders program. He's been a good representative for UT on the football field. And then he's a really good player.
Yeah, I think it's pretty easy to look at the two representatives on offense. You could talk Bru McCoy in there, but Bru in front of microphones, especially the way his path to Tennessee, maybe not the best ideal situation, but I think Cooper's a slam dunk, Joe. And then defensively, I think Aaron Beasley or Amari Thomas would be great. Yeah. But I think Amari Thomas, for reasons you mentioned, plus he's very outspoken. I think he'd be a good fit at SEC Media Days.
Yeah, so. I said Aaron, so obviously if it were him, then I don't think that'd be a bad pick at all. But as I thought about it, Amari jumped back into my head. So I'd probably go Amari and then Aaron. Both are all SEC candidates, I think, going into the season.
Yep, no doubt. And that will be here in less than 2 weeks as we just continue to venture on through the offseason. It is hurrying, and we're going to have a kickoff against Virginia in Nashville here before you know it. Josh, co-host of Josh and Swain on 99.1 The Sports Animal. What do you guys have coming up the rest of the week?
Yeah, still a lot of football talk and previewing the upcoming season for Tennessee as we're under 60 days from kickoff. So that plus recruiting. It's a very important recruiting time, as you know, Eric, for Tennessee's coaching staff. Baseball offseason, too, has continued to be a big talking point.
And don't forget to check in and subscribe for the Josh and Swain newsletter. That link is in the bio below, and you guys will have something brand new tomorrow morning.
It will change your life. I can promise that. So joshandswain.com. It's free. We won't flood your inbox every Friday morning, the Josh and Swain newsletter.
All right, that is Josh Ward of 99.1 The Sports Animal. More of Locked On Vols coming up next right here. Good stuff there from Josh Ward, and we're going to wrap up a Thursday show right here, and we're going to talk about an interview that Josh actually had on his radio show earlier this week with Phil Steele. We know all about Phil Steele. If you're a college football fan, you probably have his magazine. His magazine's out right now, previewing each and every season, each and every team of each and every Power 5 and mid-major conference. It's kind of a rite of passage of the offseason where you go and get Phil Steele's magazine, also the latest football time in Tennessee. If you can watch on YouTube above my right shoulder, and actually that's the one from last year. I got to put up the new one from for this upcoming season up there. But anyway, it's a college football guy that's been around it and knows a whole lot and is very well connected, okay? And he comes out with this preseason SEC teams and postseason SEC teams and all that good stuff. Well, he joined Josh Ward and Jason Swain on the radio show earlier this week, had a whole lot of good stuff to say. I'm going to pull just a couple of quotes from that interview and kind of discuss what all he had to say. He said, hey, quote, if you remember last year's magazine, I forecasted Tennessee was going to score 45 points per game. And what they do, 46 points per game, even topped my prediction. First 11-win season since 2001. What a great year. And I don't think it slows down at all. I think you're going to see Tennessee. They are a legitimate contender to Georgia in the SEC East this year. When you look at Tennessee, of course, the big question mark is going to be the loss of Hendon Hooker, who just had 2 interceptions all season long. That's a key number if you're Tennessee. Circle that number, 2. If Joe Milton can come near that, then look out. Milton's got the size, the arm strength, everything you want in an NFL quarterback, and he's in the perfect offense to pull out those traits. Now, again, I'm not a fortune teller, and I'm not meaning this as a slight. I do not see Hendon Hooker being the starting I anticipate Joe Milton being the starting quarterback for every game for Tennessee this year. Having said that, if you play 12 regular season games, potentially an SEC championship game, potentially a bowl game, college football playoffs, whatever the case is, whatever that number ends up being, I have a hard time believing Joe Milton will throw 2 interceptions or less. Again, that's a Hendon Hooker thing. It went back to Virginia Tech. He did not turn the football over. I'm not saying Joe Milton will throw 20 interceptions. God, that'd be awful. But I don't think it'll be 2. Anyway, so I don't think that's a way to just say if Joe Milton has 5 or less interceptions, that means that's the only way Tennessee will be successful. I don't buy into that. I think Joe Milton can turn it over, hopefully not too many times, but he can turn it over, and I still think Tennessee can be successful. Now, we'll continue on with what Phil Steele had to say. Quote, Milton's now in his 3rd year of the offense. He's got a good supporting cast. 3 starting offensive linemen are back. Despite losing a guy like Jalen Hyde at receiver, they've got Bru McCoy. They add Dante Thornton. The running backs are very deep, and the defense showed a lot of improvement last year. They improved by a touchdown per game, and I think they'll continue to show improvement. They also improved in 3rd and 4th downs and red zones and takeaways, all that stuff. I love it when other people validate what I've been saying this entire offseason, that Tennessee's defense was not as bad as everybody wants to make them out to be. Sure, South Carolina game happened, and it was abysmal, but that defense was greatly improved when you think about it. You look at the schedule this year, Tennessee's going to be an underdog at Alabama. Okay, they're going to be an underdog against Georgia at home. If you want to win the East, you got to beat that Georgia team at home. That would be the key. I think this team is very capable of getting back to double-digit wins this season, despite losing a key player like Hendon Hooker. So a lot of good stuff there from Phil Steele when he's talking about Tennessee and what's going to kind of happen with the University of Tennessee. He was asked about a player. Let's see here. He was asked about a player that's, outside of Joe Milton, a newcomer that he likes a whole lot. And he mentioned Dante Thornton. Said Dante Thornton, 6'5", 205 pounds. He's got the rare combination of speed and size. I'll go ahead and add explosiveness into that mix. He's probably just as fast as Jalin Hyatt was. He runs good routes. He's got good length. Coming in from Oregon, step in. I think he's really going to steal a whole lot of repetitions this year and be a big newcomer for Tennessee this season. And I agree. I think Dont'e Thornton's going to be a big-time newcomer. Again, football has a great way of figuring things out. Snap one. Is it going to be Thornton or Squirrel in the slot? We know it's going to be Bru and Ramel Keaton on the outside. Somebody gets hurt. There's versatility to the game of Dont'e Thornton, so he can move out. But if all four are healthy, how are they going to allow Squirrel White and Dont'e Thornton to get reps? Again, it's a good problem to have. It's a great problem to have. But I do think both of those guys are going to play a whole lot of football for Tennessee this year for sure. You move on now and ask him about the schedule for Tennessee. You said, quote, "When I look at Tennessee's schedule this year, the Florida game is no gimme." Well, of course not. If you're a Tennessee fan, you know that game is no gimme. Doesn't matter what teams look like year in and year out, that Florida game is never a gimme. Yes, they finally got the Florida jinx done last year, got the big victory there, but they do have to play the game in the Swamp. I think that's going to be a tough game early on. Yeah, I think it's going to be a tempo setter for the entire team for the entire season. So the Texas A&M game, thank goodness, Tennessee's off a bye week, and you get that one at home. I think that's why they've got to be favored in that one. But A&M is going to be one of my surprise teams. High on Texas A&M is Phil Steele. The Alabama game, of course, is going to be a tough one. Alabama's a tougher at home than they're going to be on the road. Then you look at Kentucky on the road, it's not easy. Kentucky's coming off an off week, and then Georgia game would be the final one. So those 5 games are key for the University of Tennessee. Absolutely. This kind of goes in our conversation earlier in the week about the third toughest game. You get A&M at home coming off a bye week, which is huge, and they play Alabama the week before. A lot of things working in your favor there. Alabama on the road, that's going to be tough. Plus, they're going to be looking to get back, after losing last year. Georgia at home is going to be extremely tough. And Kentucky on the road is going to be extremely tough because I think Kentucky is a whole lot better of a football team than they were this time last year at any point in time during the season last year. So, anyway, there's tons of good stuff. I encourage you to go check out that interview. They've podcasted it over at 99.1 The Sports Animal. Josh and Swain having Phil Steele join their program. A whole lot of good things to say about the University of Tennessee, and just kind of continuing this conversation of, well, is 2022 going to be a one-off? Is 2022 going to be a standalone? Again, I don't think it will be, because I think Tennessee expectation should be 10 wins. I think it should be there. Will they get there? I don't know. But if you have 9 wins, that's not a bad year at all. It's not a bad year whatsoever. When you win 10 games, it's hard to get better from one year to the next. So really, this conversation's kind of like, all right, well, how much will you get, quote unquote, worse? I don't like phrasing it that way because, again, I think when you lose all that you did and you finish 9-3, I don't think that's a bad season whatsoever. But anyway, Tennessee's good enough to win these games, and I'll be intrigued to see the game plan being put in, see how this team evolves as the season goes on. I think first game of the season against Virginia, I think it'll be an ugly football game. I just do. You're replacing a couple of starters on the offensive line that were really, really good, breaking in a new quarterback, trying to get new guys into the role. I think offensively it's going to be kind of a gross game against Virginia. It doesn't mean they're going to lose. I think Tennessee's going to win that game easily, but I look forward to seeing how this group and this team evolves from one week to the next. All right, that's going to do it here for a Thursday. Appreciate you guys, as always, for tuning in. We'll come back. We'll wrap up the work week with a Friday Locked On Vols. Here pretty soon, we're going to start looking at opponent previews. What about Virginia? What about Austin Peay? What about Florida? What about Texas A&M and UTSA, those first 5 games of the season? Who are they returning? What additions did they bring in? All that type of stuff. We'll get into the opponent previews, and here shortly we'll also get into kind of a recap, look at the positional previews for this upcoming season, and what Tennessee should expect from each position. Still some offseason content to get into as we get you ready for fall camp that's happening in less than a month, and SEC Media Days less than 2 weeks. Guys, I appreciate it as always. Thank you so much for tuning in to Locked On Vols. Please support the show by liking this video on YouTube, subscribing to Locked On Vols on the YouTube channel. Need to get to 8,000. Would love to get to 8,000 subscriptions on YouTube before kickoff. So that's the charge now. If you're listening, if you're watching, please hit that subscription button and come back tomorrow. Let's be an everydayer right here on Locked On Vols. Appreciate it, guys. Enjoy the rest of your Thursday, everybody.